From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up today on AgDay,
the camaraderie is just amazing.
Hurricane Florence devastated her family farm, but the community is coming to her aid. We have an update on U.S.-China trade talks. Is there any movement in sight? And new numbers paint a bleaker picture of the rural economy and what you should do to weather the storm.
This one I call the grinder.
AgDay, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Betsy Gibbon. Clinton has the day off. We're getting a better idea of the rural economy from an ag lender's point of view. A new Rural Main Street Index from Creighton University is out. Here are the numbers. Bankers estimate farmland prices have declined by 4% over the past year, and they expect those prices to fall by another 3% in the next year. The overall index climbed to 54.3. That's up from the 51.5 last month. Experts say the numbers indicate the economy is expanding outside of agriculture, but the negatives are tariffs and low commodity prices. The survey also shows loan demand by farmers remains strong, but confidence sank to a weak 42.6, indicating a pessimistic outlook from bankers. So what should producers do to help weather the numbers storm? Tyne Morgan has some advice from the experts.
It's the twists and turns that come with farming, causing a tightening of balance sheets on farms across the country.
I think you're going to see a decline this year. Even if our yields trend higher, there'll be a decline. I think everybody's tightening their belts a little bit.
Kevin says he's not making any big changes to the farm, as neighbors are also sticking with status quo in order to withstand tough economic times.
We've been in a 6-year agriculture economic reset, and I kind of where the 1980s, it was like a curveball. It dropped off the table and slowly came back after 4 years. This one I call the grinder. And it's having a real impact not only on the financial, but also the emotions of agriculture producers out there.
Alan Hoskins of American Farm Mortgage says while he's not seeing a big uptick in delinquency rates today, it could become a reality next spring.
I would anticipate that on the cash grain side, the delinquency may not start showing its head until February, March of next year.
University of Missouri's Pat Westhoff says the tariff relief aid payments aren't enough to make all producers whole today.
So even with the payments that farmers are going to get under the market facilitation program, it's not enough to make up those lost market receipts.
From an ag lender's view, Hoskins says there are two main groups of farmers handling the headwinds best.
Having a good handle on where they are financially, understanding their working capital, understanding their cash flow.
The second group of producers are ones that had a good marketing plan, able to sell grain and put profits on the books. But on the other side, dairy producers seem to be struggling the most.
Obviously, they have more operating cycles per year than a traditional grain farm, so they feel the pain quicker. And dairy has been depressed longer than what we've seen on the corn and bean side.
Biggest thing is come in, lay out all the cards, help the banker really understand what's happening in the operation, because there may be some solutions, again, depending on how much debt's already on the balance sheet, what the assets are. There may be some solutions to work through some things over a longer period.
Don't assume that your lender is the only lender that exists. Is the case in most situations, get a second opinion or a third opinion, because different institutions have different philosophies.
As farmers harvest another year's crop, 2019 may be more of the same.
So in our baseline update that we did in August, based on the current situation, we project another year of sub $9 soybean prices in 2019.
And as price pain pinches farms across the country, these key conversations with bankers this fall may be the lifeline to help farms survive another year.
President Trump now saying the U.S. and China are not ready to start talking when it comes to trade. The president telling Fox Business Network saying, quote, "They want to make a deal. I said, you guys are not ready yet." In an appearance on CNBC earlier this week, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said the talks appear to be going through a hiatus right now. Ross saying China is, quote, out of bullets to retaliate. He says imports to the U.S. are now nearly 4 times larger than U.S. exports to China. The president said in a statement last month that if China takes retaliatory action against farmers or other industries, There would be a phase 3 of tariffs on $267 billion of additional imports. CNBC says China is reviewing plans to send a delegation to Washington for talks. The president made the call earlier this month for E15 sales year-round. Now we're learning more about what it will take to make that happen. The EPA saying it plans to release a draft rule by February. Reuters reporting Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue said he was confident the rule would be ready for next summer's driving season. The oil industry not happy about the plan. It has threatened to take legal action. It says the EPA doesn't have the authority to change the rule. It says it should take an act of Congress, which could then take years. A case of mad cow disease has been reported on a Scottish farm. That's the first time the disease has been found in the UK since 2015. And that could mean some countries will limit their imports of beef from the UK. The disease was confirmed on a farm in Aberdeenshire, that's in eastern Scotland. Officials telling Bloomberg the case is classical BSE and doesn't pose a threat. They say the animal didn't enter the food supply. More than 185,000 cases were confirmed in the EU during the previous epidemic, but since then, cases have been few and far between. The weather finally starting to cooperate for harvest in Iowa, but wet conditions remain in parts of North and South Dakota. Meteorologist David Harker has more on how things are going in Minnesota in today's crop comments. Good morning, David.
Well, the combines are rolling in Minnesota, and we had to share this story of Elsie and her grandma. Elsie says her grandma never has had the chance to learn how everything works in a combine. And Elsie says she's glad that she got a chance to show her. And as you can see, they're even harvesting soybeans there. The latest USDA report shows Minnesota only about 38% harvested when it comes to soybeans. Let's take a look at the wind forecast map and what you'll see over the course of the day. It tends to increase in the northern plain states through Minnesota as well as Iowa and Wisconsin, with another cold front making its way through. That means more rain showers for the weekend along the eastern seaboard. We'll have a look at that national forecast coming up in just a few minutes. But for now, here's a look at some hometown temps.
Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
Grains, especially soybeans, took a hit on Thursday. We'll hear what happened on the floor of the CME coming up. And later, her family farm hit hard by Hurricane Florence. How the community came together to make sure she was able to show at the North Carolina State Fair in the country. In agribusiness, a double-digit drop for soybeans on Thursday. Let's check in with our expert at the CME for a look at why.
We are seeing some pressure come into the market. This on the back of, I think, outside market volatility spilling over into commodities. We see the dollar catching a little bit of a bid, but I want to focus specifically on some of these grain fundamentals here in the very near term. This morning, we got an absolutely pathetic export sales number from the USDA for both corn and beans, and I think that added to the pressure that we've seen so far today. Now, moving over to the soybeans, a little bit more disappointing of a trade. As with corn, though, we saw that dismal export data this morning, which really put the pressure on as the floor opened up. Big level to keep a very close eye on as we wrap up the week. Obviously, 850 is psychologically significant, but above that, there's a 50-day moving average and some previously important price points between 856 and 860. The bulls must maintain price action above this to wrap up the week. If they can do this, I think that we can continue to work a little bit higher. This move today, basically, eliminating the gains that we saw on Monday. So I don't think it's anything to get too concerned about. The trend is higher highs and higher lows and short covering from funds. So as with corn, we think there's relatively decent value on this pullback. So that's what we're looking at to wrap up the week. That's what you should be looking at too. This has been Oliver Slope with Blue Line Futures from the floor of the CME.
The stock market, the commodity market, tariffs, all weighing heavy on the ag industry. AgDay's Clinton Griffiths has more on what this all means for investors.
Doug Whirling with Bauer Trading, our guest over at the Agribusiness Desk today. Doug, as we watch the stock market compared to the commodity market, it's two different type of scenarios that we're seeing. Stocks continue to stay pretty strong and have rallied, and we've had a little bit of turbulence there, but for the most part still pretty strong, while commodities have been kind of lagging. That dynamic, though, can change, right?
Yeah, so the commodity market's been in a downturn essentially for 3 going on 4 years. You know, you've increased supplies as demand has kind of scaled along. But see, the thing that happens with this tariff situation that we have ongoing is, if you notice, our trade deficit's actually widening. We will get an increased price that we pay as a consumer because of these tariffs. The company is, well, how much will they absorb? How much have they already absorbed? They're going to pass it on to the consumer. That acts like a tax. That's like higher gas prices. Well, that all takes a certain amount of time. It's not a futures market like commodities. So we hear tariff, the market immediately drops off. Equities take a certain time because their indicators are more delayed. So we have increasing interest rates, you know, higher taxes to the consumer with tariffs. Next thing you know, you get into a situation where, whether it's stagflation, inflation, the economy slows down a little bit. So you see the equity market pause. And in recent trading days, you've seen them take a look at the effects of higher interest rates and what that does to the economy going forward and understanding of risk. Well, there's a process. You have a lot of fund managers short a lot of commodities in smaller markets, big markets. But when they decide to get out of said equities to lighten the risk, to take profits, they'll also look to do the same in commodities. So you'll see some markets that have trended down most of the year trading higher as of recent, and vice versa. They have to change those positions, and then they will look at those because you have commodities, softs for example, 15, 10-year lows. Value trades. So you should see at some point, and that's backwards thinking, but money come out of equities into commodities.
Into commodities, even though tariffs are there.
And it could help the grain trade more than people realize.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Appreciate it, Doug. Thanks so much. We'll be back with more Ag Day right after this.
For a free 2-week trial to Jim's daily global market letter, call Bauer Trading toll free at 1-800-533-8045. Ag Day, brought to you by the Enlist Weed Control System. More weed control, less drift and volatility, maximum yield potential.
Welcome back to Ag Day with meteorologist David Harker. David, this is what everybody's waiting for, the 90-day. So what are you expecting? We've seen some wild weather over the last couple of weeks.
Oh, and the fact that it's been so dry out in the plain states and out west, and you can see the temperatures, unfortunately, are just going to be above normal, and that goes for a good portion of the country up to the northeast. It's the Atlantic coastal region that remains normal. Now, when we switch things over to the precip, you're noticing a lot of the deep south and even portions of Florida as well as the Carolinas dealing with a lot of precipitation. Normal in the Great Lakes and the central plain states. It's not until you get to the upper Rocky Mountains that you tend to see the below normal temperatures. Again, this is 90 days out for November, December, and into January when we talk precip. Look at the next cold front low pressure system up north of the Great Lakes. We've got the cold front stretching down through the midsection of the country. High pressure building along the eastern seaboard. This next system providing rain showers, although it doesn't look like a whole bunch through the Great Lakes region down into the deep south, but it will pick up steam and it'll pick up a lot of moisture as we move into the daytime on Saturday. Notice more precipitation forming just ahead of the cold front out west in the northern plain states, the Rocky Mountains. We've got high pressure. That means bright sunshine, dry conditions where you may not necessarily need it. It's not until this cold front really makes its way offshore that you start to see more of the lake effect variety showers, whether it be along Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario. We transition to the precipitation estimates. This is going into the upcoming weekend starting today and going into Saturday. More precipitation the further this front goes, but as you notice, it still remains dry. It's the portions of Texas that you see those areas of 2-3+ inches over the next 24 hours, and unfortunately, it's where rain doesn't need to be. Take a look at the jet stream as we look into the upcoming weekend. This big dip in the jet stream is that low pressure system and cold front. As the ridge of high pressure builds going into next week, you notice a lot of dry conditions, and this will be for a good portion of the United States unless you're along the deep south. That's where most of the precipitation is going to be, even as we look into the end of next week. Unfortunately, the temperatures are going to be more less than seasonable in some locations, including the Great Lakes, where we're probably going to be in excess of 10 to 15 degrees cooler than what we typically would be. Dry conditions remain out west. That's where I think the warmest of the temperatures will be, even as we move into the week ahead. Let's take a look at some hometown temperatures. Forecast for Burns, Oregon, 72 degrees, bright sunshine and comfortable with that low in the morning here at 30 degrees. Greenville, Mississippi, afternoon rain showers, chance there, 72 degrees on the high side. And up in Schenectady, New York, high temperature of 60 degrees.
Coming up, we get into the zone in Farm Journal College next.
Plan for the unexpected with weather forecast updates. Local forecasts are delivered right to your cell phone each morning, making planning a little bit easier. Just text Weather 6 to 31313 to get started.
In this week's Farm Journal College TV, it's all about being in the zone. Here are AgDay's Clinton Griffiths and agronomist Missy Bauer.
Welcome back to Cord College TV. Missy, let's talk about creating a zone when we have access to water. So an irrigated field, how does that change the way that we build those maps?
So it's going to change our management zones quite a bit. When we start to look at what's inside the watered area versus outside the watered area, things like nutrients removed, because the yield in here is a lot different than it is here. So your P&K levels can be different. Also, we're looking at different utilization as far as variable rate planting populations inside versus outside. Things like nitrogen can be affected as well. So we want to make sure we have the lines split where the pivot covers versus where it doesn't. See a lot bigger differences in what's going on in these management zones.
So we don't want to just ignore what's outside the pivot, because you know that is a significant amount of land if you add it all up.
Yeah, it certainly is, and it depends how your pivot's set up, and each field's a little bit different in how you can actually have that layout. Of course, it depends where you're at in the country too. Maybe some areas, maybe they're not even farming these dry corners, so that's a little different situation. But in a lot of areas, we still do farm the dry corners, and it does add up to a lot of acres within the field. So we want to make sure that our management zones reflect the differences between inside and outside. We're still pulling our soil samples out here. It's just a different zone than in the inside, but we definitely want to manage things differently.
Coming up, her house and farm damaged by Hurricane Florence. But that's not stopping one teen from making her show dreams come true. Next in the country.
Keeping track of the shifting market prices has never been so easy. Get the latest commodity prices sent directly to your cell phone with market updates. Just text Markets 8 to 31313 to get started.
In the country, brought to you by Kubota. Check out Kubota's RTV X1140, a rugged utility vehicle with seating for 4. Stop by your local dealer today or visit Kubota.com.
Coming back from a hurricane can be tough for farm families, but one teenager is showing it can be done with a little help. Linda Loveland has more in this report from the North Carolina Farm Bureau.
A whole summer on the show circuit culminates here at the North Carolina State Fair. Cheyenne Pike's been showing for 10 years, since she was just 5 years old.
I love the atmosphere. The people are just the greatest people ever.
But Cheyenne and her goats almost didn't make it.
And they kept telling us that if you didn't flood in Floyd, you're never going to flood. But it did.
Did it ever? Hurricane Florence put a foot of water in their house, their barn even more.
And I looked at the pictures, and my blower's under 4 foot of water. My clippers, all of my clippers were underwater. I mean, their coats were underwater. Everything in the barn was tipped over and floated over. And I thought, man, Chelsea's over for me.
She also lost 2 of her show goats. Her family lost 2 turkey houses. Their home had to be gutted. But friends stepped in and helped Cheyenne finish the show season.
Because I still had 3 or 4 circuit shows left and the fair, and she's like, I'm not going to make you stop. She said, I'm going to let you keep going with my stuff. And so she gave me a bunch of her stuff.
We did not realize how much we're loved. All these people have just come up and just hugged us and loved on us, and it's just been great. We're blessed. Sorry. It's okay. I keep doing that.
For now, Cheyenne is in her happy place, surrounded by her family, friends, and animals she loves.
I'm not going to quit. I mean, you can knock me down, but you can't knock me out.
She'll head back to Jones County in a few days to help put the farm back together.
The whole community right now looks like a war zone, but then you look in behind all their stuff that's piled up on the road, and you see 30 people in that person's house helping him tear out. And it's just, I mean, the camaraderie is just amazing.
Well, that's all the time we have this morning. We're glad you tuned in. For all of us here at Ag Day, I'm Betsy Gibbon. Have a great day.